During the Great Depression, survival was not a hobby, a television theme, or a challenge you could opt into. It was a daily reality for thousands of Americans who took to the rails, living by their wits and the unwritten codes of a culture built entirely outside the reach of stable society. These were the hobos, men and women who travelled from town to town with almost nothing but a bedroll, a tin can, and whatever knowledge they could trade along the way. Hobos survived because they learned how to read the hidden supply chain of rural America. One of the greatest secrets of Depression-era hobos was their ability to recognize where goods naturally accumulated. They knew how resources flowed through a small town, how leftovers moved, and where waste ended up. Railroad junctions were the lifeline because they connected farms, factories, warehouses, and town centres. Where goods moved, scraps followed. A hobo arriving at a new junction rarely wandered blindly. They followed the path of overflow, grain spills near loading docks, discarded crates behind produce warehouses, broken tools in rail yard refuse piles. Anyone today can apply this principle by learning to read patterns of abundance. In a modern context, this might mean identifying where farmers dump imperfect vegetables, knowing what day bakeries clear out old bread, or mapping where construction sites discard usable wood. For those practicing bushcraft, the same concept applies in nature. Follow the natural flow of wind and water, and you'll find driftwood piles loaded with dry kindling or low points thick with edible plants. The skill is recognizing how materials travel through an environment and positioning yourself where those materials naturally gather. Hobos thrived because they mastered the art of turning trash back into tools. The stereotype of the hobo carrying a bindle isn't far off, but what people forget is that almost everything in that bundle was scavenged and repurposed. A tin can was not just a can. It was a cup, a stew pot, a shovel, a lamp, a bait container, and sometimes even a signalling device. Broken wire from telegraph lines became fishing hooks, snares, clothesline, or sewing material. Old burlap sacks became packstraps or insulation. Hobos treated every scrap as raw material, not garbage. To apply this practically, train yourself to evaluate objects based on function rather than original purpose. If you're out hiking and find a discarded metal container, clean it, and you instantly have a cooking vessel. If you come across fabric remnants, turn them into fire-starting char cloth by heating them in a closed tin. If you're gardening, use cracked buckets as worm bins or compost starters. The hobo mindset forces you to pause before throwing out anything that can be turned into utility. Hobos survived by forming coded networks of information that guided scavenging and safety. One of the most fascinating aspects of hobo life was their symbolic communication system. Hobos carved or chalked symbols on fences, posts and buildings, leaving messages for the next traveller. Some marked homes that were generous to strangers. Others warned of hostile dogs, unfriendly sheriffs, or contaminated wells. These codes also marked places where food was likely to be found, such as a farm where the owner threw damaged produce near the barn, or a cafe that set out kitchen scraps. Today, the modern equivalent is silent scouting and information sharing within your own community. Gardeners who exchange tips on when orchards drop cull fruit are practicing the same tradition. Urban foragers who map locations of edible weeds or partially used construction materials are doing a modern version of hobo codes. Even in wilderness survival, Leaving signs for fellow travellers, such as cairns marking water sources, is a continuation of this same communication system. The lesson is to build networks, even small ones. Survival improves dramatically when information moves faster than scarcity. Hobos succeeded because they knew how to approach landowners with respect and strategy. Unlike the myth of constant trespassing, most hobos actually preferred asking before taking. They learned that a polite request for work in exchange for food yielded far better results than sneaking into a farm and stealing eggs. Many farmers respected this direct approach and offered simple chores such as splitting wood, fixing fences, or sweeping barns. Hobos often described this as working for a handshake meal. The modern equivalent is straightforward. If you're practicing sustainable foraging, always ask permission on private land. Offer something in return, whether labour, produce exchange, or clean-up. If you live in a rural area, speak to local orchard owners about gleaning. Many will gladly let you collect fruit left after harvest. The Depression taught that transparency builds long-term access. Hobos endured because they combined resourcefulness with strict discipline. Scavenging alone didn't keep hobos alive. Their survival rested on discipline. They kept their bedroll dry at all costs. They never passed up clean water. They cooked small meals to avoid waste and saved leftovers whenever possible. They planned their travel around light, weather and rail movement rather than impulse. They carried the bare minimum, but carried it consistently. You can apply this by restricting your own outdoor kit to essentials and committing to maintaining each item meticulously. A sharp knife, dry tinder, a reliable container, and a warm layer matter more than flashy gear. The scavenging tricks of the Depression-era hobos weren't acts of desperation. They were systems, tested, refined, and passed down railcar to railcar. Whether you're a historian exploring forgotten American subcultures or a survivalist building skills for hard times, these lessons carry real value today. If this deep dive taught you something new, make sure you subscribe to Backyard Wisdom, share this guide with others who love real history, and help keep these overlooked traditions alive.